Okay, this is OK here, and we have a very exciting stream lined up for you today, all about Crazyhouse openings. So actually I have the board here set up in standard, and Stockfish at depth 42 seems to like d4, which is quite interesting. But we're going to go to our first position, and because that's Crazyhouse, and Stockfish at depth 31 likes the move e4, or depth 33. So this is rather interesting. It is true that e4 is the sharpest line. It opens up both the bishop and the queen. Let's draw accurately. Opens up both the bishop and the queen. It lays claim on the center of the board. And maybe the one slight weakness is it does slightly open up the king a bit, because the e3 square is then weak, and the bishop can come in and target f2. But if you want to play a Crazyhouse just as in normal chess, you have to develop your pieces quickly, get your king safe. And in this stream, what I'd like to discuss is how to create weaknesses, how to identify weaknesses, and how to exploit weaknesses in your opponent's position. And I'm going to start this with some very fun, kind of short games and fun positions, and some very short games to begin with. So we're going to begin with some very basic ideas. So what are actually the weak points in the position? Well, in the starting position, the weak point is probably f7. Once the king has castled, g7 is a potential weakness. c7 is also potentially quite weak, because it's only defended by the queen. So for example, d7 you see is defended by the bishop, the queen, and the king, whereas c7 is only defended by the queen. b7 could be a weakness because it's only defended by the bishop. And a7 is not likely to be a weakness because it's too much at the edge of the board. But h7 could potentially be a weakness once the king has castled. So we're going to try and look at identifying some of these weaknesses and then how to exploit these weaknesses. So just let's roll into game one. So we have about 20 studies or so that I would like to share with you. 20 ideas. Okay, and this one we're going to be focusing on the weakness on g7. So this is a game between Kren as white, one of the strongest Crazyhouse players, and I was actually black in this position. So this was probably when I was still quite new to Crazyhouse, and I was nervous about f6 for some reason in this position. So I wanted a really safe king, so I dropped a pawn on f6. So you'd think I'm really safe and solid in this position, but maybe my development is not so good. And here Kren played quite an amusing move. After knight here, the queen is no longer defending f6. So he goes straight for an attack on g7, because g7 is the one protector for f6. And I foolishly took that pawn, and knight takes f6, smothered mate. So you always have to watch out for these smothered mates. In normal chess, but even more so in Crazyhouse. So when you undermine g7, that lets you come in on f6, and if you're trying to play very defensively, as I was in this particular game, you could get smothered mated. Okay, so the next game is a game between Crazy Kid 76 as white and Jan Lee as black. And we're going to look from Jan Lee's perspective. And the square we're going to watch out for is, again, because the theme at the moment is the weak G square. So let's see how that played out. So Jan Lee is black here. So notice there's a weakness on c2. So there's a big exchange of material. Jan Lee pins the knight because it's a way and look how his development is really good. Now with this move knight e2, so this is the thing. G2 is often a problem if you go knight e2. Knight e2 is quite a good move, but it does block the queen's protection of f3. And so we see an attack straight away on g2. the way you attack g2 is often with a pawn on h3, as we saw in the previous game as well. And his plan is simple. If you take that pawn, knight to f3, just like the other game, would be smothered mate. Crazy Kid wasn't foolish enough to take that pawn, but instead he played bishop d2, threatening the queen. Unfortunately, he didn't spot knight at d3 and another smothered mate. So I hope you enjoy this another example of the smothered mate. I'm just going to check that I'm featured on Lichess at the moment, if all people could let me know. Yes, I am. Cool. So this is going to be a really fun stream of Crazyhouse openings and identifying weaknesses. This is going to be good. So next one. This is another very short game. We're going to start basic and get really difficult towards the end. So in this game, actually, I'm white against Rek, and black is playing quite passively. This is a perfectly decent opening to play as black, but you have to be careful because again we're focusing on the weakness on g7 or g2. So because black is fianchetting his bishop, he has to be careful of the h6 square, and at some point probably push h6, because otherwise pawns can drop on h6. So I'm going for a quick exchange of pawns. Notice my rook is protecting my queen, so I don't mind a trade of queens. But black should absolutely avoid this. So the best move for black here would in fact be something like this. But in this particular game, I was allowed my exchange of pawns, and then this again, black should absolutely stop the exchange of queens, but black allowed the exchange of queens. Now his knight's under attack, so he moved the knight, and oops, the queen lands on d8 with checkmate. So what he should have done is castled. But even then, so pawn takes knight, pawn takes pawn. Now in itself, that wouldn't be a problem, losing a knight for a pawn, because this is quite a safe setup for the king, as long as he gets to push that pawn to h6. The king is actually fairly safe. In fact, attacking it from the front is really difficult. So if I were to face with this kind of king and I wanted to attack it, I would attack it from behind, maybe with a pawn drop on e7. But in this position, the problem is you can go knight at e7 check, just to push the king onto a dark square, and then pawn at h6. And we have a queen in hand, so the bishop's trapped. If he sacks the piece, there's a mate threatened here. You can try and block this mate, but it's pawn at h6. King would have to take this pawn. It's not mate immediately, but it's quite a hairy position for black. So the computer's saying plus 27. Queen here, so we're threatening queen takes pawn, pawn here, these sorts of ideas. Queen at h5, queen takes f6 indeed comes. The threat is pawn at g5, checkmate. And basically it's pretty hard to stop. If, for example, this, then there's also bishop at g7 checkmate. So there's a double threat. Pawn at g7, and if the queen just moves out the way somewhere, well, it's not an immediate mate, but mate is coming rather soon. So probably just with something like, yeah, well, bishop e2 is completely crushing. I was thinking h3 even, but maybe that's not so good. But yeah, even h3 would work. Okay, but the point is the black king is right in the open, and it is so because of an attack via h6 on g7. Hi there, chess31217. What is your opinion of the first CWC match? And bishop at g7, not at g5, is the threat. Yeah, it's true. It's bishop at g7 and at g5 in that last position. Indeed. So my opinion of do check out my YouTube, and you can see the link to my blog there, and I'll just post the YouTube link. So guys, do subscribe to the YouTube. And the reason I was sharing that is also just to give the link to the blog. This is the Crazyhouse CWC final is happening on the 10th, 17th and 24th, so the 3 Saturdays, the last Last Saturday at 6 p.m. GMT was day one. They played 20 games, and Jan Lee is 11-9 ahead. And on this blog, you can see recaps of all the previous rounds of this Crazyhouse World Championship. I think Oppa didn't really use his theory as much as he might have done. In the opening with e4, e5, and the 4 knights, he played h3. And I did a video last night, so if you go to my YouTube, just analysing game 1 of the Crazyhouse World Championship final. So do check that out after the stream. And I go into quite some depth, spend like just 1 hour on that, just one game, because I thought it was a very interesting game and I thought there was a lot one could learn from it. And do check out the blog. There's lots of stuff like puzzles. If you go to Crazyhouse World Championship, there's lots of links about the Crazyhouse World Championship, all the recaps of all the previous rounds. There should be, and there will be a recap of the candidates. There's a sort of recap at the halfway stage of the candidates. Yeah, so that's announcing the CWC final, and there's links to Crazyhouse puzzle sets on Lichess, lots of stuff like this. And incidentally, there's also, just to let people know, there's a Lichess meetup in London on the 24th, but I won't be able to go to that because I'm hoping to stream actually the 3rd week of the Crazyhouse final, which actually clashes with this. But okay, so back to the cool openings. So we've had a few openings where the attack is on g7. So we're going to start with basic ideas and ramp it up and get more difficult. Now, this is actually in the middle of a game. Hi there, Adimare. Someone forced you to bet on either Oppa or Jan. Where would you put your money on? I've always put my money on Jan, but in a way I'm supporting Oppa because, yeah. But you can never rule Jan out. I think Jan always plays the time controls that other people like. He likes experimenting. He likes to be challenged. He doesn't, and Oppa is becoming like that also. So he's purposely not playing his best opening sometimes because he wants a challenge. But maybe against Jan Lee, I think he should. He says he'll play all the theory he knows, and I think he intends to. But he really has to win because Jan Lee's obviously very good. So this is just from a game against from myself against Lone Wolf. I've placed a knight in check on the queen. This isn't an opening, but it's illustrating a really important point, which is f7 is a potential weakness. If the Lone Wolf had just stepped to the side, king g8, black is completely winning. But what actually happened in the game is he took the knight, and this creates a weakness on f7. And whichever way the king steps, this actually happened in the game, you can drop a pawn on f7. And if you take that pawn, the knight takes the queen with check, and mate will be coming. So just to see that line, if king takes, you take the queen with check, you win another knight, and you take a bishop, you take that, and it's quite clear you'll be mating because you've got so much material. So maybe the king tries to run, but then there's this check, and actually notice these bishops are actually, so this is actually a double check. King has to run here, there's no other square for it. You win a knight, you don't want that rook in the attack as well, so you might as well take off that rook. Bishop here, and the king's got two choices, because take the knight or slide to the side. If he slides to the side, there's this, knight back, and if the king comes forwards, then this is checkmate if the king comes back. But this all came about, and if the king does the other thing and takes the knight, then knight here, and this is also checkmate. But this all came about because this pawn at f7 was allowed, and if black had just stepped to the side, then black is completely safe. Now, although this is not, strictly speaking, an opening, we're going to see lots more openings coming, and it just illustrates a really important point. You have to identify your weaknesses and be very careful about certain squares. Okay, now we're going to go into some more basic ideas, but this time we've got to focus now on the f7 square being a potential weakness. And this is a game between Jan Lee and Markwar 18. Well, Marco 18 is asking for trouble by playing f6. So f7 is really a weakness, and Jan Lee just goes straight for it. Puts the bishop on this diagonal, lines up the pawn to try and get an exchange of pawns. He takes the pawn, doesn't worry about losing the bishop. He promotes to a knight, so you get some check. In the actual game, Marco took this pawn, and queen here was checkmate. End of game. Oh no, that didn't happen. He took the knight first. Okay, he took the knight first, knight here, and then he took the pawn, and queen here was checkmate. And what else could he have done? He could have dropped the king back, but then there's just queen h5 check. You can block, but you just win a pawn. If he blocks with the bishop, you win a bishop. You take it back however you like, and pawn here is checkmate. So if you leave your f7 square weak, you could lose in 9 moves, as Marco 18 did in that game. But even if you're a top player, so this is a game between Jan Lee and Hauge 3000, who is now plays under the name Lasso, international master from Norway. And we see another attack on f7, very direct. So d5, takes, attacks the bishop, defends the bishop, takes back, and he allows the sacrifice on f7. Doesn't seem too dangerous, does it? e6, and he steps up, and knight here is already checkmate. Bishop's cutting off, the knight's cutting off, and the queen is cutting off the king from advancing any further, and the pawn is stopping the retreat. If the king had stepped back, then maybe he could have survived a little bit longer. No, actually, so if you step back, there's pawn at f7, and king here, knight at f5 is checkmate. So in fact, the only way to survive a little bit longer is actually to do this. But then there's going to be an exchange of queens, and yeah, black's king is in the open, and the game is not going to last very long. Okay, so we've seen a knight. That was a pretty nice example of an f7 attack against an international master in chess. Boom. King out in the open. Okay, so we're still on the basic ideas, just 2 more basic examples to go. We've focused so far on g7 and f7. One more f7 game. e4, e6. This is between Jan Lee and Satyros. And again, okay, we got an attack on f7, but and Satyros just ignores the attack. So he takes on f7, attacking the queen and the rook. Queen comes with check, so it seems like black is safe for now. But then he invites the trade of queen, so that's okay. But he has to be careful now. He just plays rook f8, and because the knight on f7 defends, d8, queen at d8 was checkmate. So if you allow a piece into your camp, it can support another piece in your camp, and you can very quickly be overwhelmed. So he was doing the right thing, trying to kick that knight out, but rook f8 was not the right move. What maybe could he have done? It's kind of rather dire position, apparently, already. So the exchange of queens was probably the mistake in the first place. Maybe rook f8 before exchanging queens was the thing to do. Okay. And now for the last of our basic ideas that I'd like to share with you. This is really nice stuff, so okay, so this is a game between Master Tan as white and Jan Lee as black. And it's a French defense setup. And we're going to see more of these French defense setups in the more advanced ideas. So Jan Lee not being very subtle, going for queen takes f2 checkmate. So this is interesting, this one, because the previous examples we gave were attacks on g2 and f2, and now we're going to look at attack on both f2 and h2. So the attack on f2 to begin with, and then he takes the knight, and now there's an attack on h2 as well. And the correct defense here was bishop to f4, defending this pawn, and then I think the position's okay. But instead, Master Tan blundered a little bit by defending with the bishop. Knight takes bishop, and he thought he could just push the pawn h3 to prevent queen takes h2 checkmate, but the bishop lands on h2 anyway, and it's checkmate. I just thought that was a very very visual mate in 10, and kind of illustrated. So we've seen now G2, F2, and now F2 and H2 combined. So it's a nice little series of examples. Okay, now we're going to look at a slightly more complex position, slightly more complex ideas. And we're going to look at a game between myself and Blunderman 1, where the attack came on two squares, C7 and G7. And it was a D4, D5. Usually these openings are a bit more of a slower build, but already these doubled pawns are not strong doubled pawns. If the black bishop takes here, then these pawns in the center are very good. They also enable the rook to come to the open C file, and those central pawns are quite good. These pawns actually create a lot of weak, are slightly weak. They do support E4 though. That's the strength of having these two pawns. But the weakness is that there are a lot of weak squares. And so in this particular game, I went straight for the weakness on C7. And Blunderman 1 just kind of ignored me. So I win a knight and a rook. And then I step back. And he goes for his own attack. Well, okay, that was a bit of a blunder, because he's opened up G7 now for my bishop. And if he takes my knight, rook here will be checkmate. And if he doesn't take my knight, then we have the classic smothered mate. So, a very short and sweet game. I just happen to have a knight and a rook, which I've just eaten up with my bishop pair, and just was very lucky that he kind of walked into this smothered mate idea. Okay, so watch out for the bishop down this diagonal. It can be quite dangerous. So that was a quite a basic, still quite basic, but we're getting a little bit harder. So the next game is going to be between Schwanet and All You Need Is Left, and we're going to still be sticking with the G2 idea. G2 idea is almost the most basic attack on the castle king, but we're going to get more and more complicated versions of it as we go along, and more other squares. By the way, is just to check something. Yeah, seems like my stream quality is really low, so I'm hoping. Yeah, hopefully it's back to normal. It says excellent, but it's pretty low. Okay. So what is this game again? It's Schwanet as white. Okay, and we've got the sort of e4 knight f6 kind of setup. Okay, and because white hasn't pushed the d pawn, the knight can swing to f4 and target g2. The d pawn is pushed now, and actually probably in this position taking the knight is not such a good idea, because the knight next to the king perhaps protects the king a little bit, so taking the knight exposes the king a little bit too much to black's attack. So maybe that was a slight mistake from white. And in this position, the white king is exposed, so Schwanet, sorry, All You Need Is Left actually, went straight for the exchange of queens. Schwanet went for the mate threat on d8, but there isn't time because knight f3 check. So the knight can't take this knight because of queen at g2. So we've gone very directly for an attack on g2. So he can't take that knight, so he has to step to the side. But now now he has to take it. Takes back, king takes, queen here, and we don't have a pawn to finish off white. The king could just drop back. But queen and knight combine to finish off on h2. So it's g2 and then finishing off on h2 with queen and knight combining. Quite a pretty combination. Hi there, Dusky Mountain, and thanks for the encouragement that everything's working fine. And hi there, VSim. Yeah, we're doing some really nice stuff tonight. We've done the basic stuff, so you're joining now at the intermediate ideas. And the next one we're going to look at is a game between T-Cubes AK and Caragialis. And so in each of these games, we're trying to look at a weakness in the opening and how you both identify the weakness, how you create the weakness, how you identify it, and how you exploit it. Dusky Mountain says, I already feel my Crazyhouse skills going up. Yeah, Wonderful. I think this is really fun stuff. So this is a classic French defense kind of position. I must have reached this position plenty of times myself. And Caragialis is black. He's threatening to win a pawn here, and the best thing to do for white is exactly what T-Cubes does, is just castle quickly away from danger. And okay, black wins a pawn, but it's not a problem. But now here, T-Cubes plays a very sharp line. He could easily move the queen to one side. But he goes for this very sharp line, where if black takes the white queen, white will take the black queen. And we're going to come back actually to this line later. But this is an opening study. We're not looking at lines, we're looking at ideas. In fact, we're not going to memorize lines at all. We're looking at really cool ideas and identifying weaknesses and how to attack them. Now, there are actually many interesting moves in this position. So we're going to come back later to black playing queen takes bishop in this position. Well, just if you look at the opening book, knight takes queen is quite common, queen takes bishop is quite common. We're going to look at an unusual move that Caragialis played, which is pawn at h3. So, because the theme of this section is attacking on the g2 or g7 square. So we've done the basic ideas. Just to recap, we had some basic ideas of attacking on g7, then some basic ideas of attacking on f7, and finally even attacking on f2 and h2. So now we're starting at intermediate ideas, and we're looking at the g2, g7 attacks. So h3 is quite an unusual move, and the idea is that if you were to take the queen for free, well, it's actually possible to take the queen. e7 is covered by the knight, so there's no immediate mate. The queen could move out of the way, and you get this sort of position. And actually, this is okay for white. But if white is spooked a little and takes the pawn, then you have queen takes bishop check, takes back, knight takes queen. And this position, according to the engine, is still fairly equal. If I just turn it on, it's still fairly equal, but it's actually really difficult and it requires really precise play. And maybe black does have an edge. So what Caragialis does in this game, it's very hard to beat what he does. Bishop at g2, so he's simply threatening mate in the corner. So that bishop can't be taken, because if he takes it, knight at h4 will be mating. So this is a classic g2 attack, but just dumping a piece on g2. Yeah, so this is Crazyhouse opening theory with the difference. It's not opening theory. So knight check. This is really nice because takes knight here check. If you take the bishop, knight here check, and queen at g2 will be checkmate. This is really much more interested in just looking at those weak squares. So what was the idea of sacrificing that knight? Well, the idea is you're getting the bishop off g2, so now we're going to threaten a queen on g2. So the knight drops defending this, and knight to f4, threatening knight takes pawn, checkmate, but the knight can't take the bishop, or queen at g2 will be checkmate. So it's like the crossed swords, really tough position, really sharp position. Pawn at g2, well played by T-Cubes, bishop takes g2. And at this is the position where T-Cubes made an error, because he took the bishop on g2, which seems like a completely natural thing to do. Who wouldn't want to take a piece which is sitting on your d2 square right in front of your king? But the best move for white is actually bishop at e3, so it's never been played in this position. So white, bishop at e3, because the bishop on g2, well, h1 is covered, and the bishop on g2 can't actually harm you. You can take the rook, and then you can take back, and so on. But what happened in the game was knight takes g2, and now we have a mate. So can you see the mate? We've got a pawn and queen in hand. h3 is weak. Adimare sees it. Someone's getting smothered. Indeed. Queen lands on g1, and knight takes f2. Really nice mate. And Dusky Mountain saw it even earlier. Wow, knight takes g2 leads to smothered. Nice. You can see it in the move list, says Antic. Yeah, okay, I should have. can't help that. So that was a really nice game from Caragialis. A really tough defense. In a way, he used an interesting move at h3. We're going to come back to this idea, we're going to come back later to some very sharp lines with queen takes bishop, and that will be in the advanced section. In fact, it'll be in the super advanced section. It'll be the very last chapter we do. Okay, so we've looked at some ideas where attacking via g2 in this intermediate section. We've got just 3 more studies we want to look at, where instead of attacking via g2, we're going to attack via the f7 square. Okay, and now this is actually a study by Obi, who's Andrejil on Lichess. And it's this line where normally if I were black here, I'd play e6 and absolutely stop an attack on f7. But there's some very good players, including the finisher, who invite this sacrifice on f7 because they believe they can defend, like so, something like so, and putting another bishop here and defending f7. But you have to be very careful. And let's just look at one particular example that I think it was Obi who found. It's knight h3. It's a novelty. It's never been played by white. And the idea is simply you're looking at potential checks on these 2 squares, and you've got the bishop and the knight targeting the square, and then maybe you've got a pawn landing on f7. So maybe a threat of knight here, pawn here, these sorts of ideas. Maybe force the king up somehow. Okay, so suppose black plays h6 to really clamp down on the g5 square. This turns out to be a little bit of a blunder because of pawn at g6. Black can still recover slightly by playing bishop at g6, bishop takes g6, but then there's this and he's losing the bishop, and it's a rather uncomfortable position. But if he plays king takes g6, which looks perfectly natural, then there's queen to h5 check. And we're going to get, if the king drops back, we have knight here check, and if king goes here, we have queen here checkmate. And if we take the knight, okay, the same thing's happening. Takes the knight, knight takes g5, and queen here checkmate. So we can't go not taking the free queen, so we take the free queen. Dusky Mountain says I get smothered mace a lot in normal chess, even at 2000, 2100 level on Lichess. Yeah, and Antic says I did it once in over the board blitz versus a buddy who was really strong, felt good. And Adimari says I've gotten about 4 in my entire life. And Dusty Martin, I've had 4 in about the last month. So, and yeah, Adimari originally said Crazyhouse gives you unrealistic expectations about how often you get to play a smothered mate in regular chess. Yeah, that is true. So White has sacrificed his queen, but there is a mate. Can we see a mate? We have a pawn and a knight in hand. I can't see the mate. Where's this mate? I'm thinking knight here, maybe? Do we just move the knight here? Yeah, maybe move the knight here. That cuts the king off. So the king would have to go to only this square, or this square, and maybe then we can mate with pawns. We could go pawn here, for example, king comes up, pawn here. Yeah, I think that's going to be mating. So yeah, move the knight, and we're mating with pawns, or we just use the other knight. So it's checkmate. Knight at f4 or g3, yeah. I mean, we have actually plenty of material to mate here. We've even got a spare pawn in hand. The king is completely trapped on white's half of the board. So, wow, that was quite a nice study by Obi, don't you think? You think you're defending g5, and suddenly you get this crazy attack coming on g6. But it all started with the weakness on f7, because you couldn't drop back because of drops on f7. So, yeah. So now, this penultimate intermediate puzzle, we're going to look at f7 again, and this is a game between Jan Lee as white and Little Plotkin as black. And, well, this is actually an opening trap that people should be aware of. Bishop to g4 is actually a blunder in this position. because of this. Bishop takes f7 check. King takes f7. So if you don't take this bishop, well, white's just won a free pawn and the black's completely open. So you get a position like this. And yeah, I mean, this is very bad. So maybe you take the sacrifice. Now what does white do? Okay, he checks first. The problem is if black goes to a light square, he's going to be checked by a pawn on f7. So he might save himself trouble and go straight to... he could also go to here, but that's just going to be... Yeah, if he goes here, that's just going to be bringing the knight in, I think. Yeah, so that's also going to be asking for trouble. So knight d5, knight takes knight, and then queen takes bishop would be the line in that situation. But so he drops back, and at this point you might, at this point you sacrifice your queen on the bishop with the idea of coming in on the e6 square. So suppose that, so you've just won a free piece unless black takes back that queen, and then you come in on e6. And now almost everyone, as white, in this position will take the free queen. Black doesn't have anything to mate the white king. The black king is kind of in the open, and white is clearly winning. But Jan finds an even stronger move than taking the queen. So hi there in chat, Dusky Mountain saying your corridor, hi. He plays bishop at f5. So he's still threatening the queen, but now he's threatening the knight as well. Can't defend both at once. What this actually takes advantage of is the queen doesn't really have any nice squares to go to. I mean, you can go to here, or like here would be in a discovery, or here, g8. I mean, g8 and b8. I mean, really, what wonderful squares the queen has. So actually, the best that black can do is going bishop takes f2, and then white absolutely doesn't take that, just slides into the corner. And suppose black goes for at h3, trying to go for some kind of attack. Again, you don't take the queen, you just go knight d5 check. King drops back, f7, and the king has to go either take that pawn or take this one, and there's going to be a discovery. You're taking the queen with check. That's when you take the queen. Why not knight takes f2? Ah, good point. Let's just finish that. So king takes bishop, queen here, and that's checkmate. So why not knight takes f2? Okay, that's a good question. So knight takes f2 isn't check. So we're still coming in with knight d5, right? And we can do all the same things that we did last time. So yeah, knight f2 will just be the same mate, I imagine. Knight d5, mate in 6. King to e8, pawn at f7. So it's exactly the same mate as with bishop takes slide across. So that's the threat, and you don't even take the queen because of this threat. Yeah, and Antic says as well. Yeah, it is indeed mate. So hi there, Chuck Moulton. So this is really important. I mean, because it's such a natural move to do. Bishop to g4. It's such a natural move to do in this position, but the bishop can be taken at e6, and then this other knight's coming in, and yeah, it's just a really bad position. And bishop at f5 is the move that very few people play, but Jan Lee does play it, so no one can say that Jan Lee doesn't know his opening theory. He knows his opening theory. It's completely one position taking the queen, but he's very accurate. He plays bishop at f5. So the final intermediate position I'd like to look at. Hi there, Dusky Mountain. That's a nice mate. Yeah, it is. Victor Terral is white, and I'm the one suffering as black in this position. And we've got another of these ones. So it seems natural to develop the bishop, pin the knight. I play e6. Maybe e6 is a slight mistake because it takes away coverage away from d7. Victor Terral hits my queen. But what's the real mistake here is queen h5. What should I play here? Let's just have a look. Oh yes, I remember now. The move to play in this position is bishop takes knight, you lose your queen, and you take this. You win 2 pieces for the queen, and this is actually pretty decent for black. But I made an opening error and I played this, and just look at the... And so this, so while the last studies were looking at attacks on g7 and f7, this is going to be an attack on d7. As Antic says, he's just strong enough, he knows what the best move is, not necessarily theory. Right, exactly. The best players, they just play theory without realizing it. So I go here, he exchanges his knight for my bishop, and he goes straight in. He's only got a bishop and a pawn. Surely that's not enough to attack me. He goes straight in and attacks on d7. Now that I think about it, maybe I should have sidestepped, because I think I walked straight into that. But maybe if I sidestep, it's not really much good either, because he's taking, let's see, if I go king d8, he's taking my, and if I take back, what's coming next? It's still knight e5 coming, hitting this. So, and queen takes g2. So I'm just trying to see, is this really so bad? And apparently it is really bad. You go bishop f3 and then take on c6. So yeah, anyway, so I took the bishop. I was like, okay, I'm going to take any pieces you give me. Unfortunately, this is check, and my queen is attacked both by the bishop and the knight, so even if I take off the knight, my queen is hanging. But he's not interested in my queen. He takes with the pawn, and it does cover check on my king, which finds itself right in the center with absolutely no... Okay, so I'm trying to squirrel myself away. So this has all come about because of this weakness on d7, which Victor Tarrau... Oh, look at this pin. First the d file, now this diagonal. Victor Tarrau identified this d7 weakness, and he has utterly demolished me. Bishop takes f3, yes. So earlier bishop takes f3 was the move that I missed. Yeah, thanks, Antic. But at this point, I've lost it. Bishop takes f3. If knight takes, bishop takes. If bishop takes, yeah, I'm still in the game. Bishop takes f3. Bishop takes is also possible. Yeah, and the queen just drops back. Queen to d7, d8, something like this. Yeah, it's still a +3 game. Okay, so we've seen some of these intermediate ideas. We're now going to get to the advanced stuff. And the first one is a real classic. This is an old game between Chicken Crossroad as white and Jan Lee as black. But I should really look at it from the white perspective. So let's just turn the board around. And this is real old theory. I don't play e4, e5, but this is real pretty stuff. And it's the old 4 knights Italian game. Knight to d5, and it's this position where there's so much pressure on this f6 square that black is willing to give up the queen. Knight takes d8 is good. I mean, some people play rook takes. Apparently that is also interesting, but is also kind of refuted. Knight takes d8, they're all the lines are quite complex, and all the lines are supposed to be lost for black, but they're definitely interesting. I would play knight takes d8, but apparently it's also bad. Bishop takes, bishop to h5, so black is trying to use his minor pieces to gang up on this knight on f3. And black now plays a very interesting move. Black is Jan Lee. Sorry, white is, black is Jan Lee, white is Chicken Crossroad. Chicken Crossroads plays a very interesting move. Instead of defending the knight in some way, like a knight on d2 or something, he just sidesteps the pin. So just suppose black does the obvious thing and cashes in. Then there's a very pretty mate that Dusky Mountain says, I've lost this position as white several times, and Antic says, yeah, me too. Well, they can be quite sharp, the lines, even though white is supposed to be winning. There's a really pretty mate now, with only a knight and queen in hand, knight at f6. So I didn't say this is about weakness on f7, g7, or h7. This position is really beautiful. This is like advanced stuff. It's like there's actually a weakness on f7, g7, and h7 in this position. It's just incredible. So knight to f6 is going to create a weakness on g7. It's hitting the weakness on h7. There's got also this weakness on f7 with the bishop, which the bishop is targeting. So if black dares to take this knight, which seems like a reasonable thing to do, knight at f6, threatening mate in 1. If the king slides across, queen at h7 is mate, so you better take it, right? And now the really pretty move, which Janley did not, which Chicken Crossroads rather, did not actually find the first time they played this line with Janley, because I saw it on Janley's stream. He played queen takes pawn, threatening mate on g7. But there's a really pretty move that white has in this position, which is queen at h8, giving away the queen for free. King takes is forced. Then the queen comes in with check. If the king slides across, then we have pawn here check, king goes back, queen takes rook, king takes pawn, rook here checkmate. So that's not a good idea. Well, that's apparently the line. So what else could black do? He could also block with something. But then we can still take this rook with check, and he could block with something else, I'm guessing. Now what? Have I not found the fastest way? Queen takes queen. Queen takes rook. So I want to go. Maybe this is not so short. Let's just check if I've missed something. Because I think there was a forced mate. Oh, okay, yeah, I completely missed. Pawn at g7 first. Okay, my bad. Okay, it's all about g7 weakness. Pawn at g7 first. The queen can't take it, so it has to step to one side. Ah, that's more like it. So yeah, I just missed the mate in 2 right there. So yeah, nice one, Chuck, who spotted it. Yeah, so this was back in the day when Jan and Chicken Crossroads were both 3,000 or so. Yeah, indeed. White ELO 2,800, black ELO 2,900 in this particular game. But this is a little bit later because this is actually an earlier variation. This is the first time they found it. Okay, so queen at h8, really nice idea. So black learnt not to take this knight on f3, and instead play something like knight at f4. It's absolutely critical to cut off this queen from h6. So this is how the game actually continued. Knight at g5. The idea being, again, we're going for this h7 square. If knight at h7, g7, king g8, g7... Oh, I missed a line. My goodness. Yeah, I should have done that. Okay, so if bishop takes knight, let's just look at that line, because knight here, pawn takes. We're gonna sacrifice our queen. Queen takes pawn. If knight here, we're going to go pawn here. King takes, but now the knight is actually providing coverage and can take this queen, which I hadn't noticed. But we still got rook in the corner, checkmate. Yeah, nice one, Dusky Mountain. Yeah, which also leads to it. Yeah, thanks Dusky Mountain and Chuck. You see, I'm not an e4 player, so this is, although I was familiar with it, I'm not as cognizant as I should be. So, it has come to pass that black has realized he must at all costs block this queen from coming into h6, and so black has started playing moves like knight at f4. And so white in this particular game went at g5, again targeting the h7 mate. Takes. Okay, we need to defend this square, so we do it with the knight. And now pawn at e7, hitting the rook and the knight. Okay, so we just need to defend our back rank. Takes. And white picks up a knight and checks. And this is looking dangerous because we have some other ideas. If only we could get the f7 square empty somehow, but the bishop and the rook are both covering. then we might have some other idea. So what we do is we take another knight, and if black takes back, and I should just turn the engine on to see, maybe taking back is a bad idea. I think everything's a bad idea is the problem with this position. There's not really much black can do, so I'll just go with it. So you take the knight, takes back, and I think there'll be a mate here. Rook at h7, says Dusty Mountain. Bishop covers. Queen takes knight. Oops. Yeah, queen takes knight first. Then rook at h7. Okay, and now we're going to get a smothered mate. But the bishop's covering still, no? So what we do is, okay, if the bishop covers, then we take it. And if the pawn takes, then we're going to land on f7 with checkmate, because the bishop no longer covers f7. But if the bishop takes, then we take the bishop, and we land on f7 with mate. Whew. So yeah, I think that counts as advanced ideas. And it's a really nice mate. So we just got a few more to go. So this one is a game between the lone wolf as white and myself as black. So I should have it from black's perspective. Okay, so this is actually an opening trap which Mixu told me, the finisher. If white has played d4 and knight c3, he really should develop this knight before going bishop to b5. And the reason for that is because otherwise the g2 square is weak. So we're back to, like we did in the basic ideas and intermediate ideas, we started with the weakness on g2. Well, we're going to be continuing with the weakness on g2. So it takes the knight, takes back, and we have a fork on the bishop and g2. White could always retreat the bishop back to f1, and that's a perfectly decent move, but no one wants to do that. And Antic says, yeah, you did this to me a few times, lol. Yeah, indeed. And actually, the games with Antic were very interesting, because in this position, Antic always went queen here, and we get some really sharp lines. I wonder if we can insert some lines if they come up in the... Yeah, there's Antic OK. Let's put that in, insert. Because I didn't win those games. So let's see, where is it? Yeah, in here, queen f3, yep. So I go bishop at e4, just doubling up on this file. So white really is in trouble, but Antic goes straight in on the counterattack on me. So yeah, this is a real lesson. I'm going attacking his g2, he goes straight in attacking my weakness on f7. Okay, I've got a nice queen though to show for it, but I might be losing that queen. And that is a slight problem, because when I lose the queen, I'm losing it with check, and there's a mate threat on e8. But no matter, I'm taking back with the bishop, and the bishop actually covers e8. And pawn at d5. So actually in these positions, black is actually completely fine, but they're just very difficult to play. And I played bishop at a4, which is not the correct thing. I mean, this is the only time it's been played. If I just turn on the engine, it says black is -11. But it's just very hard to find the right moves. So something like queen at e4, still white has knight at e3 defending this pawn. It says knight at h4. I mean, yeah, Stockfish is saying black is completely winning, but in practice it's not so easy. I mean, can white just take this bishop and then threatening this? Well, maybe not, because knight takes g2. So it's a case of, yeah, white's got some very severe threats, but somehow we can counterattack. And ooh, there's a mate somewhere. So we have to counterattack really sharply, basically, to get in. So let's just see this mate. Knight at c4, check. Well, could just take this knight, but that doesn't work, because then the queen comes in here. King here and pawn here is checkmate. So suppose the king runs to e2, then pawn to d3. So what's the idea here? Pawn takes. Not seeing it, not seeing it. Just trying to... Oh, I see. We're trying to take this pawn with check. That's the idea. So he doesn't want that to happen, so he goes to e1. So I can't take it with check with the queen, but I can take it with the knight with check. So he tries to run. Pawn on e2. I'm afraid I'm just copying the computer moves because I don't see it at all. If knight takes e2, then yeah, the queen is taking the rook with check, and that's all over. With a pawn on... No, actually, the knight's covering g2. Oh, but I've got a rook then in hand to land on e1. That's checkmate. Okay. So the king better take this one. Okay, but now I can take a bishop with check, and I've got a bishop landing here, so... I mean, I still don't see quite the mate, but I can believe I've got enough diagonals to mate. I'd be thinking like bishop at d3 and pawn at e2 would be what my hunch would be. But computer is saying go with bishop g4. Of course, the knight just can't take that bishop, so he'd have to just block with f3. Okay, that's blocking him off. Okay, then go bishop d3. Okay, fine. You could just step back somewhere. Okay, we'll win a pawn. The point is, if he takes my queen, he's loosened up this square, and we've now got a two-pawn mate. No, we don't quite, because yeah, that doesn't quite work. So we take the knight first, apparently, and then he blocks. Again, I'm sorry, this is getting quite a long time, but oh, we can just take this pawn as well. Okay, and here, and then the pawn will mate. Okay. So we did really have good control on. We just actually sacrificed everything just because we got so much control on these light squares. So yeah, just to run through this again. So black is about to get mated, but can pick up a pawn and just yeah, actually takes the knight as the way and checkmate. So yeah, so I should have won that game, but I can show you how the game actually turned out, and it was something quite different. After this move, I tried to run my bishop somewhere else, trying to still keep an eye on this square. You attack my bishop again, and I try to defend it, double up the threat. Okay, the knight comes in. Oops. I mean, queen here is a problem, but then king takes knight, so you just back up. And then you... Ooh. So apparently you're winning in this position, but with this move now I'm back in control. Well, some control. But anyway, I have no idea what's going on. It's just way too sharp, this. Oh yeah, the moment my bishop leaves control, then I'm losing that. And I can't... You're coming in on me and smothered mate. So yeah, that was how Antique beat me, guys. So backing up, queen at f3, very interesting, very sharp move. Because bishop at e4 is clearly a good move in response. But this line with queen takes f7, it's really sharp to play. Antic says, this is a bit deep, and Stockfish is a god. Whoa, says Dusky Mountain. But okay, knight f3 is a more natural move, just simply developing, protecting g2. And actually, I think we saw this in one of the Crazyhouse World Championship final games. And it's very tempting to take this pawn, but actually bishop d2, all you're getting is a pawn out of it. It's not much good. And there are other good moves in this position, maybe hitting this knight, yeah, at e4, at g4, they're not bad as well. But the really nice move in this position, which is a move I want to show you guys, is bishop at b5. And if I just look at the opening explorer, it's only been played 3 times, and all by me, wow. So that's my novelty, guys. I'm giving you away my opening secrets. Bishop at b5 is a really nice move. It stops white from castling. And what should white do in this position? He should probably do a move like pawn at d3. And then black could maybe do something like this, and this would be with best play. Something like this might happen. And there's this really nice idea of pawn at e2 trying to deflect the queen, because if the queen takes, you then take the rook. So this would be a kind of example. Okay, so it shows you. I mean, this is going even deeper. Check and defends. Okay, so black is really very happy. So that would be opening theory. Maybe it's -2 for black. Not bad at all. Yeah. Actually, knight to e5. So knight to e5 is a very natural move. I think this is the move that the lone wolf played against me in this position. John Dusky Mountain says I won against John Stuckey. Chap Moulton, I like bishop at d5 better than bishop at e4 anyway, in response to queen f3, because it defends f7 too. Oh, that's a nice point, bishop at d5. And maybe a pawn, but then we could just simply take the pawn and then queen takes f7. So we're still faced with the same kind of problems, I think. But you're right, you get an extra pawn out of it. So nice one, Corridor. So yeah, what happened here, this is actually really nice. This knight attacking the queen and also attacking f7. So notice how, so this is actually quite unusual because the weakness that's being attacked, and this is why it's an advanced idea, is e2. That's a very unusual weakness to see it being attacked in standard Crazyhouse. Normally it's f2, g2. So here it's e2. Okay, queen takes pawn check, bishop defends, and now a very nice move which I actually found. If I show you the opening explorer, see, only been found twice. So I was on form in those days. I played pawn at e2, and the idea is if he takes my queen, which actually happened, I take his queen with check. If he takes with the rook, queen at e2 is checkmate. So it's an e2 attack. He has to take with the king. Queen at e2 comes. King goes to c1. Okay, but the move I didn't find in this position, and apparently the winning move in this position, is to just sack that queen you just laid on the board for a knight. The idea being you lay the knight with check, and that knight's defended by the bishop, so you can completely relax about it, and then lay again another check. So if the king goes to here, we have knight here check, and knight... Oh, we have just knight takes bishop check. But the point is we're winning the bishop, because we've got now double attack on the bishop. See, so if the king tries to defend the bishop, you have another check and we can win the bishop. So what was the point of that? I guess we lost our queen for 2 pieces, but we've got some nice initiative. And again, it's one of those positions where it's not really obvious that black is crushing, but Stockfish says it's -14. But as an example, you exchange a knight, land a bishop on it, and take a rook, and now you're in on the back rank. And if you get a position like this, then okay, we can agree that this definitely is crushing. But a few moves out there, it's not, at this point in the position, not so obvious that black is completely crushing. But you have to say, what are the weaknesses? And f3, g2, and yeah, get in on the back rank. The back rank will be a weakness too. Okay, so that was, I'm not showing in detail how the game with Lone Wolf went, but I managed to convert that. In fact, I think I've won all my games with this bishop at b5 idea. So that's quite nice. See, 3 wins for black, all for OK. Good stuff. So you guys should use it too. And actually this reminds me actually of an opening idea that Opperweisen shared with me. So just actually having a look at that for a second. So he was looking at knight to c3. Yeah, knight to c3 ideas. Because, yeah, so if black plays e5, just continuing as if it was e4, e5, instead trying to transpose into some kind of e4, e5, then we can go knight f3. And actually, you wouldn't want to take this pawn. Why would you not want to take this pawn? Because... I'm trying to remember, why don't you want to take this pawn again? There is some reason. I guess it's because attacks on f2 are maybe a slight concern. But no, you can take the pawn if you want to. But suppose you have this kind of setup, you push to d5. Yes, so this is a kind of position. We have another example of this pawn at h3 was another example, attack on g7. That's what the theme was of this attack on g7. And you have again an example of this fork on the rook and the bishop. So this is he could defend the rook with the knight, but then you hit the knight. And this is really a very nice and pleasant position for white. But after knight c3, what if black plays instead d5? Knight f3. So there are lots of possibilities, but let's just look at one. d4. And yeah, the very nice idea that Opper has is, what about if you sack the knight for a pawn? And this is actually quite nice for white. Although you're sacking a piece for a pawn, you get all the black pieces are not developed. The bishop is trapped behind the e6 pawn. White is already castled, already on the attack, and the black king is still in the center of the board, and white is coming in. So f7, h7, lots of attacks here. Now that it creates a weakness on f6, and white can push already f5, come in with f6. So this is just an opening idea. So Dusky Mountain says Opper always has interesting opening ideas in both Crazyhouse and chess. Yeah, so this is some stuff. Yeah. So yeah, and actually I actually pinched a couple of these games from his study when making my own Crazyhouse opening study. So this is a game between Mirak as white and Jan Li, and it's an example of a player as white beating Jan Li. So Jan Li played the e6 b6 setup, and it was a little bit passive. So I think this game is very instructive how Mirak actually completely demolished Jan Li in this position. So he pushes e5. So what are the weaknesses we're going to attack? It looks like it's going to be a g7. So we'll see. Actually, it's not going to be g7. Curiously, it's going to be one of those ones where e7 is going to be weak, but we'll see that in a second. Yeah, this is a very nice move. Okay, so just backtracking a second. Bishop takes knight, castles quickly so that this bishop is now under threat. Takes, and it looks like black's got quite a nice attack on quite a nice pin on the knight and pinning it to the queen. But Mirak K finds a really beautiful move, which is bishop at f6. And the idea is if you take that bishop, knight at g7 just picks up the black bishop for free. But if you don't take that bishop, what else can you do? If you sidestep the queen, we're taking on g7, and that's really bad. And so what actually happened in the game is Jan Li took the knight, Mirak took the queen. Now there's a mate threat on e7, so he has to take. Mirak took back. King goes to c8. The reason for that is because the queen drop on or a bishop drop or just any piece drop on g7 is a big danger. So Mirak drops his queen on h4, and it's just hitting this weak e7 square as well as hitting the bishop. So it's a fork of these two weak squares. The bishop drops back. Knight here takes the bishop, and he's going to invade in with his queen. This is a very nice idea. So the point is, this pawn is pinned, so he's just picking up this pawn for free. Really accurate play from Mirak. He keeps his king completely safe. Just there's nothing on this diagonal, completely solid. Comes in with his queen on the back rank, takes the pawn, and as I say, whenever you want an attack, the real key piece you need to attack with are pawns, because you take this pawn. If the pawn takes, bishop here is checkmate. Otherwise, pawn takes pawn is coming. Jan had no pieces in hand and resigned in this position. So I think this is a really instructive game. So going back to how to create weaknesses. So that was actually the next study I was going to look at, as well as this one. Okay, so this is Jan Li as white against Opper Wazen. So this is more kind of opening prep of. Oh, this is really nice. So this is some nice against this bishop g5 line, because this looks quite dangerous for white. He's hitting f7. He's hitting c6. So what to do? So we defend. Okay, and this is a very common idea in Crazyhouse. You try and undermine. So normally we're looking at G7, but now we're going to go B7. So undermine B7 because then the knight is hanging. Okay, and maybe a good move is pawn at D7 in this position, but very nice move, knight B4, hitting white's weaknesses. Jan need to step his king to one side. Now, pawn at D7. Stockfish recommends queen D7, but I don't really see why that's better. But takes, and the queen steps back to get out of the pin of the bishop. Okay, and he just sacks his knight on that pawn, and now this knight comes in with check, and he's winning the queen. Notice that he can't take with this knight, or that would be queen coming in, checkmate. So he takes with the other knight, but now, oops, the other weakness on G2 is falling. So this was a really beautiful crush from Opperweisen against Jan Lee. Jan Lee's white, check. He take again another little fork. He's hitting the king and this pawn, and he's coming in now on the back rank, and just coming in with all his pieces and just taking everything, and Jan Lee resigned. So yeah, why was this game instructive? This looks like quite a scary position, but knight b5 is a good move, and there are two moves you can do in this position: either knight to e4 directly, or knight takes c2. So this is an example of c2 being weak and g2 being weak. You've got and somehow your own weakness on b7 suddenly turns into a strength because you end up your bishop's on that diagonal hitting g2. So I think that was a really nice example of exploiting weaknesses. So he just exploits this weakness and really comes in and just now h2 comes in on h2, and then the final weakness in the endgame is often the back rank. So don't forget, it's not only squares that can be weaknesses, but also and we saw that in the beginner idea. So the really beginner idea right at the beginning of the stream, as well as squares being weaknesses, also files and ranks can be weaknesses, and this is just a really basic idea. Oops. The D file was a weakness for black. But the purpose of that was also to show that if black does castle, the point h6 and g7 are weaknesses. Okay, so we are now to the very, very last of the studies I wish to share with you. And we're back to this French defense. And this is something so some of the previous stuff I have to thank Opperweisen for sharing with me. And this one I have to thank Fumitox. And yeah, this is some nice stuff. So we're in the French defense, where white gives up this pawn just to get the king safe. And we see this very sharp move, bishop to g5. And this actual game, Fumitox was white against Art of Deception as black. So both sides were familiar with this line. Black takes the bishop. So we saw the game with Crazyhouse where he dropped the pawn on h3 and then took the bishop. Okay, but Art of Deception takes the bishop immediately. This is actually also a good line. Knight takes queen, knight takes queen. So both sides have got queens. So this is a very sharp position. Queen at h5. This is a nice move, just hitting f7. And also the queen is probably doing some defensive duties because, well, actually the knight's doing defensive duties anyway, so the queen's not really needed, I think. But oh yes, it's not really needed because also the bishop. So if the bishop weren't there, there would be knight at e2, king here, queen here, and a smothered mate. But the bishop's defending e2 anyway, so I think everything's really well covered for white. Okay, but actually, yeah, this is actually important because it means you can go bishop takes g6. You're not hanging knight at e2 and a smothered mate now. So it's quite important that the queen is covering e2. It's kind of worth bearing in mind. Smothered mates are kind of tricky. Okay, so bishop takes g6. So this is all theory of a kind, a rather sharp kind of theory. So you try this anyway, and obviously you can't slide the king over because otherwise you get smothered mate, so you have to take it. And this enables black to take back that bishop. Okay, so now white, whose Fumitox sacrifices the knight and drops another knight with check. And f7 check, king d8, and bishop f6. And this is again, this is all the best moves. If I were to look at the opening explorer, yeah, only Fumitox has played it, and he's played it both against Art of Deception. So it's, but it's all following the Stockfish line. Bishop at e7. Okay, so actually, interestingly, if you take this bishop, and this did actually happen in one game between Art of Deception and Fumitox, then white is crushing. So I should really turn this board round because this is a nice. So this is both a winning line for white, but actually a line that it could also be losing for white. It's a kind of line where just one tiny error and black is mating. But in this case, pawn takes bishop is certainly a mistake because of pawn at g7. And I mean, there are just too many pieces coming on the back rank, and white is safe. Okay, but the next time this happened, he didn't take this bishop. Taking the bishop's a mistake. So instead you have to defend the check, have to block it. And now we're back into theory. Bishop takes bishop, knight takes, pawn at d6. Knight f5. Now, this is really interesting, because if white does a very natural thing, pawn takes pawn check, he is completely losing, I think. The correct move is rook takes knight. If black takes the pawn, again, white has one winning idea, and it's to distract that rook, and then he's completely winning, apparently. But why is he completely losing if he does something so minor as taking a pawn? Well, it turns out he just gives white the one pawn he needs. If he does this, he gives white the one pawn he needs. He gives black, rather, the one pawn he needs for a counterattack. So suppose he did a move like queen to b5, and there are other moves he could do instead. He could do rook a takes d1, and the same thing applies. So let's look at queen b5 first. So what is black's crazy idea in this position? Okay, so here it is. Queen at h1 check. How about that? King takes queen forced, and sacrifice the rook on h2. Takes. Come with the knight. Oh, these knights are coming in. Oh my goodness. Okay, and the point is, if you step back, a pawn is landing, and if you step here, knight takes pawn. Let's see. Rook takes, knight takes rook. You're picking up a rook as well. I'm going to just look just in case, but yeah, I'll keep the engine on because it's pretty exciting. So if you step back, knight takes pawn. If you step here, pawn here is checkmate, so you better take it. Oh, I don't even need to do that. I just go knight here, check. Very nice. And pawn here is checkmate. So kind of simple mate. So just in this sort of sample line, after knight at g4, I have to step up, but that's still no good because I'm still winning a rook with check, and that will be mating. If I try running, yeah, I can't run up. This is actually a really nice pattern. Two knights at distance 3 from each other like this control a whole block of squares. So he has to run down, and white's getting mated. So that's what happens if you take this rook. But crucially, white doesn't have to take this rook. Actually, this might be a slightly better move. King g1. Then black takes rook takes g2. now you have to take it because I think otherwise bad things will happen. I can't remember why. Why will bad things happen if we don't take it now? Yeah, the engine's abandoned me. Let's have a think. So if we go just step to the side, we could do knight. Smash said, what about rook a takes d1 to get rid of that knight instead of queen b5? Yeah, absolutely. So let's do that instead. I mean, I was just trying to do it as a sample line. The thing is, if that queen is there, it actually can be picked up with check. That's the problem. There's still queen at h1, takes, and now you're picking up the queen with check. So, yeah, this doesn't work either. But it's a long variation. The idea here is that if you take the rook, you're taking the knight with check. So you try and avoid taking it, but you're forced to take it in the end. And then you sack the queen, but you're winning a knight with check. You'll get there eventually. Gets a queen and checkmate. Yeah, so I'm not saying this is the best line. I'm just giving this as a sort of sample of this. There's some really long mates, starting with queen at h1, and if white makes the mistake of taking the pawn, now obviously the best thing to do in this position is simply not to take this pawn. Go rook takes knight. You're not giving black the extra pawn, and then I think white is winning. But if you're to do the very natural thing of pawn takes pawn, king takes, at d6 check, king d8, and bring the queen in, just as a sample idea, that's not the best move. So I should really promote this variation. King g8, promote variation. Rook takes g2, and I still don't see what the mate is if you just go here, and that's why I was just hoping the engine would just come and help me out here. But maybe knight takes pawn. No, that doesn't look right. Maybe knight here. So then if king takes rook, we have, maybe we have enough pawns and bishop. No, it's not clear because the knight is defending both here and here. So try and distract the knight from one of these and attack on the other one, something like this. But anyway, I'm not entirely sure what happens. But if he ever takes the rook, knight here. Ooh. So this is just a sample line that could happen if the king were to go to h2. So if the king goes to h2, we can check, takes, and the knights somehow can create a net around the king. So we can get just a mating net just with knights if he runs to h2. If he runs to h3, so this is the very last bit of study basically. So we're doing some crazy advanced stuff. Then again, it turns out there's a mating net. You're picking up the. Are you picking up the queen with check? No. In this variation, you only get a draw. So there's this crazy line where you get a draw against white. Smash says that's some real computer shit. And Antic says rook h2 might be it. Mating with minors is hard. Yeah. So, oh, yes. Just simply rook h2. After king h1, you mean? If king h1, rook h2. Ah, yes. Now you can't go here because of knight here. Oh, no, you can't do that. Knight covers. Oops. Huh. There must be something. So yeah, I'm just, come on engine, load up for me. I'll just reload this page. Yeah, I'm bereft without my engine, darn it. I'm not Jan Lee. So what is the idea? If the king goes to h1, you go back to h2? I mean, maybe it's quite happy with a draw. I think that's the situation here. It's quite happy with the draw. Lol, rook h1. I don't know. I'm just trying to keep checking. Yeah, you can. yeah, this. I think the computer in this situation is like, I'm totally happy with the draw. So it's white going for the win, and white can't get the win. And I think, yeah, we saw there was one line where it is in fact a draw. But the way to avoid all this trouble with queen at h1, it turns out, is not to take this pawn. So suppose we were to just take this knight immediately. Then it turns out black doesn't quite have enough. So he can take this pawn, and if he takes this pawn, that rook gets distracted. And yeah, we get this kind of line. And if he doesn't take the pawn, if he goes straight for queen at h1 check, I think this doesn't work now. So he's just a pawn short. You win the queen with check, which is nice. But I think you don't quite have a follow-up. There is this, though. This is really nice. Bishop takes pawn, discovered check. And if you step back, you're getting mated. So I think the point of this whole variation is it's really hairy for white, but with best play, doing really non-obvious things, you can stay safe. So when faced with this discovered check, it's very important to block or move the king. So king g4 is fine. King g2 gets yourself mated. King g4 and you're completely fine, completely safe. So king g4, very unintuitive move, just getting your king out of the way. What about if blocking with a bishop or something? Yeah, bishop at h4 might also work. Knight h4 doesn't work. Yeah, but knight at h4 probably also doesn't work. So bishop at h4 might also be safe. But yeah, it's really sharp stuff. Gosh, I haven't gone through even half of it. But yeah, this is just a really crazy line and just a really fun one to finish on. And Chuck Moulton says, OK without his engine is like Carrot Top without his props. White just takes the rook and wins, says Smash. I for one accept our new Stockfish overlords. Well, I've tried analysing without Stockfish. I just get a lot of stuff wrong. So I had the problem actually. If you check out my stream from last night, I analysed game 1 of the Crazyhouse World Championship match, and I had a really slow computer. So I had Stockfish, but I had to kind of try and prod Stockfish by giving it the moves that I thought might work, because it wasn't thinking for itself, and I did actually have to think for myself to give it moves that might work. Yeah, and so they are computer lines, but they're computer lines which required human assistance. And what I realized a lot of the time is, yeah, what Oppa played, often Stockfish didn't like what Oppa played, but when it thought deeper and went deeper down the lines which it was suggesting, it didn't like what it was suggesting either. So there was a certain logic to what Oppa and to what Jan were playing. So I thought that was quite interesting, actually, those positions. Okay, so this is a really complicated position. We haven't gone through the half of it, but yeah, the point is, I mean, if we do turn on the engine in these lines, basically what you find is it says that, say, white is completely winning, but a lot of the time it says that if white doesn't do precisely the correct move, it's not this particular line, but often in these lines, if white doesn't do precisely the correct move, he ends up losing. So anyhow, I'll make this study public. Oh, it is already public. That's good. And in case you just want to have a look at any of the, just look back at anything we've looked at. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed some of these basic ideas, intermediate ideas, and advanced ideas, in particular about targeting weaknesses in the opening, just trying to see, and hopefully it's been instructive. Thanks everyone for watching. It's been, I think, quite a fun stream for me doing, sharing some of these cool opening ideas. Okay, bye guys.